In this lesson, we look at some of the settings and considerations particular to targeting the Flash player. So here we have a basic animation opened up, and we're going to want to target Flash Player 11.2. So let's have a look at the actual publish settings that go along with this. Here we see the publish settings dialog, and we can see that our profile is set to default. Create a profile, duplicate this one, rename it, import and export, and so forth. Flash Professional CS6 only comes with one profile, and that's this default one here. But we are able to create and manage multiple profiles. We have our target set to Flash Player 11.2, and our script to ActionScript 3.0. So when we're targeting Flash, we've got under this publish setting here, we can check or uncheck whether we want to actually publish to a Flash SWF or not. So when we publish to Flash Player as our target, we're going to create a SWF out of our content that is then going to be most likely embedded into HTML for display in a web browser. Although SWFs can be used in a variety of other different sort of wrapper containers. So we could rename this SWF if we wanted to. So publishing _v08. So some people use this as a versioning system. So each subsequent output is going to be a different version as long as you keep renaming them. We have here our JPEG quality. So this is going to determine any images that actually exist within our movie, any bitmap images. These are the compression settings for JPEG. And we can also enable JPEG deblocking from here as well. And what that's going to do is prevent some of that artifacting that you sometimes see at lower quality settings. We can choose both stream and event audio settings. So by default, it's pretty low quality audio. We've got MP3 at 16 kilobits per second mono. So each of these stream and event audio settings is going to allow us to choose the compression type and to choose the bit rate. So maybe I want to go up to 64 kilobits per second and the quality. So we could adjust this for audio stream and audio event independently if we wanted to. You can see when I hit event, we get those exact same properties in that box. We can also override any of the sound settings that exist on individual sounds within our library. And we can choose to export device sounds. When we go to advanced, we can see that we can compress the movie, and this compression can be of two types with Flash Professional CS6. This is new to the program. We can choose the normal deflate compression, or we can choose LZMA. So if you want to target Flash Player 11.2, you could definitely choose LZMA. It's supported in version 11 and up. We can choose to include hidden layers from our timeline. We can include XMP data. So we can also modify that from this little setting here. So XMP data is all this data here that can be read by certain clients that are allowed or that know how to actually read this sort of metadata. And this all gets embedded within our actual SWF. You can see there's actually a whole bunch of stuff that we can do here. So you have things for mobile SWF, categories, origin. And depending on what sort of work you're doing, you may not want to deal with this, but the basics with the title, description, and so forth, keywords, these can actually help search engines that are capable of reading this data, such as Google. We can choose to generate a size report. So this will just generate a little log for us. We can omit any trace statements in our code so that we don't have to go through ourselves and remove them. We can permit debugging remotely or not. And we can protect from import. This allows it to not be imported back into Flash Professional. So once it's a SWF, import that SWF back in. but it's a very basic level of security that we're dealing with here. And you supply a basic password and so forth. So here we have script time limit. By default, it's set to 15 seconds, and after 15 seconds, we'll get a little dialog box asking if we want to kill the script that's running. Then we have our local playback security. So whether the SWIF is able to access local files on a user's machine or access files over a network. So you only have one or the other here that you can actually choose when targeting Flash Player. And then your hardware acceleration. Do you want no hardware acceleration? Do you want direct hardware acceleration? Or do you want GPU acceleration? We can also modify some bits in the HTML wrapper that's generated. Though usually you're not going to actually deploy this with your SWIF. You're going to deploy it some other way. But this gives you some basics on how to actually deploy that to HTML, even if you don't use the HTML file itself. So we have these templates here, Flash only, allow full screen, and so forth. And what these basically do is just change some of the security and script access settings that we have. We can detect the Flash version, so if we're testing for 11.2, then if the user doesn't have 11.2, it'll let them know, hey, you need 11.2 and able to view this. And in size, you can define a specific size, or you can just say match movie, which works most of the time. And you can choose how the playback functions in the case that this is some sort of an animation, and a variety of checkboxes based around that, whether you want it to loop or not, and so forth. Then we have these quality settings. So default is high, and normally high is going to be just fine. You can, if you're worried about it running a little slowly, knock this down a few steps. It all depends on your target audience and the capability of their machines. So window mode, this is pretty important. Normally, window mode is set to window, and that's the default. But on some websites, when you have like menus that pop up over things, lots of times the z-index of those menus, even if it's set to a very high number, Flash content is still going to render over any HTML. So in that case, you can't actually see the menu and interact with it. So you can actually choose to do any of these two options, opaque windowless or transparent windowless. But you can also now choose direct. And direct allows things like stage 3D and stage video to have access to the GPU on the machine. And then you have scale and alignment. So you can choose no border, exact fit, and no scale. And these can all be set within ActionScript too. A lot of these things, quality, scale, and so forth. And then you have HTML alignment, how you want to align it in the page, Flash horizontal and vertical alignment. A lot of these things don't pertain exactly to the SWIF itself. They're more for this particular HTML wrapper that gets generated. So when you're ready, you hit publish, and it'll go through and publish your content. And once it does so, you can see, for instance, here, we have our HTML page. We have the little report that's generated for us because I chose to generate a size report. You have the SWIF itself and SWIF object. So SWIF object is a little piece of JavaScript that's used alongside of HTML in order to actually embed the SWIF and provide a little bit of information to the user in case they don't have a compatible version of Flash Player in their browser. So this has been a rundown of the Flash Player target settings for compiling to Flash Player from Flash Professional CS6.